Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith Live, seen Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. right here on the Consequence of Sound Instagram page. I want to thank you all for joining me as always, and would love to introduce my guest right now, the one and only Bob Mould. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thanks, Kyle. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, for any of you all who haven't checked out the series yet, the whole concept is here. We're talking the big global topics, what's going on, the hot buttons around the world, but how it relates to the music industry, how it affects musicians' arts. And it's really super topical and interesting because, from what I understand, that's exactly what you get from the new Bob Mould record called Blue Hearts. That's due out September 25th, as heard especially on the very first single that we've landed so far, with American Crisis. Now, Bob, as I understand, this is not a new song that you have written. I mean, obviously it's a new song release, but it wasn't written specifically for this exact moment that we're in, right?
No, American Crisis was written in the group of songs that became Sunshine Rock. So I think the last time I checked my notes, it was April of 2018 that I wrote American Crisis. And going back to my calendar, I would have been in Berlin. So I think that's where that all came together. Yeah, I brought the song to the band in May of 2018, May of 2018, when we recorded Sunshine Rock. And the idea with that album was to be a happy record, a little more optimistic after two darker records. And American Crisis was a little edgy for that record, so I shelved that and then picked up the Shocking Blue cover of Send Me a Postcard. They're pretty much the same key and the same tempo, and it's funny because Send Me a Postcard was I think that was the only first take on the floor vocal that I had done on basic tracks. So anyways, carrying forward to now, yeah, it's a 2-year-old song, and just when I thought things were bad 2 years ago, here we are.
That's sort of been the thing about everything, is every single point we've said, well, it can't get any worse, as if we hadn't watched enough movies in our lifetime to know to never ever say that. That's sort of what we're being faced with every day. I do find it interesting, and you and I got to talk a lot about Sunshine Rock, the material that you were writing from Germany, looking at the U.S., and especially as you were coming back to the U.S., this definitely seems like, even coming from your punk rock past, this seems like maybe one of the angriest, loudest, heaviest songs that I think you've ever written, at least in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, because again, how we can hear this song right now, looking at the Trump administration, looking at what, especially the GOP side of Congress are trying to push. Just looking what you mentioned evangelicals in the lyrics and everything, how that's sized up and everything. What's changed, especially in that song, from how you wrote it to where it's landing right now that you can see?
Well, I mean, a lot of things have happened this year in 2020. A lot of things have happened in the last few months. I mean, in Louisville with Breonna Taylor, with Minneapolis, George Floyd, many, many things like that, many tragedies like that over the past year have been brought to light. Many tragedies like that over the last 400 years have happened on our soil. A couple of years ago, it just seemed like, it's things are really bad. It's this, sort of, charismatic, say anything television guy, who somehow snuck into the White House, not winning the popular vote, but winning the Electoral College, and, sort of enacting all of these, regressive ideas, taking us back to the 50s, I guess the 1850s. And, now there's really no glass left to break. I think most of the emergencies are clearly in front of us now. Writing from Germany, I think all countries in the world, I think, there's, populism has been on the rise for a while. In the Netherlands with Geert Wilders, and France with Marine Le Pen. You've got Orban, you've got Duda in Poland, you've got Bolsonaro. I mean, you've got the cast of characters is great. Johnson, you've got all these characters, it's really frightening how quickly these things can turn. And, the song like American Crisis, those words fell out of my head in probably the amount of time it takes me to sing them. And, yeah, I haven't written a song that pointed in years, but then again, things maybe haven't been that terribly bad in years and decades, maybe. And now the confluence of, with coronavirus and, the elections hopefully coming up, we've got a lot of things on our plate, a lot of trouble right now in the country. So the whatever urgency the song had 2 years ago has only been amplified 100-fold in the last few months.
And of course, for those who don't know, when you go back to your early days, speaking of Husker Du, I mean, you guys were a Minneapolis band. You brought up Minneapolis with George Floyd there. And again, you're not in Minneapolis right now. I believe you're in San Francisco, right?
San Francisco, yeah.
Have you been in contact with people over there? I mean, what has that, I know this is a bit of an obvious question. What has that been like, as you're seeing that as your hometown?
It was tough. I mean, under any circumstances, terrible to see such a tragedy. To see Minneapolis in such unrest, and to, just have memories of going there in 1978, to be, a kid who I grew up in a farm town in upstate New York, 5,000 people, no people of color. I get an underprivileged scholarship to go to Macalester College, and I get there in September of '78, and on my dorm floor alone, it's, people of all religions and, ethnicities and beliefs and histories, and I had a lot of catching up to do really quick. In 1979, I was lucky enough to get a band going. Band was called Husker Du, and over the next decade, that band, along with a lot of bands like the Replacements or Soul Asylum or Prince or Terry and Jimmy or all the this just wide variety of musicians and artists in the Twin Cities. We all congregated on a venue called First Avenue, and everybody shared the stage and everybody played equally. And I remember the Hmong resettlement in the late 70s, the Somali resettlements later on. I mean, Minnesota's been, working on diversity for decades. And then to see something like this happen, and I haven't been living there for a long time, I had to dig back into the information, looking at the police unions, which I think we're all finding out as, sort of that's a really big problem right now, strong force police unions, excessive force on the street, connections to Trump, just the general police state, the prison industrial complex. I know those are a lot of big topics to throw out at once. I guess I just felt terrible for the tragedy, and I felt really bad for Minnesota. I used to live a couple blocks from that precinct that burned, and watching footage, and seeing things go by. Oh, there's the old Husker Du studio. Oh, there's Glam Doll Donuts. There's my friend's record store. It's just sort of, I haven't had a jolt like that since 9/11, I guess, when I lived real close to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. So it's just, just personally, that's how it was hitting me. I mean, if it took, and, I think in the wake of that, again, all of us refocusing on Black Lives Matter, and now defund police, and, a lot of different social ideas that I think we need to address. Again, speaking on Macalester, one of the, I was just really grateful to get that scholarship, and then ending up, doing a lot of work in sociology and political science and economics, and trying to build an urban studies major for myself before those kinds of things were standard jobs, I guess. So, I mean, I think I understand cities. I think I understand dynamics of cities. It's something that I, again, had formal education in. Now I'm seeing a lot of things, these ideas of gentrification, and I think in Louisville, right now it's, again, I think as we're looking for, as we're looking beyond redlining and gerrymandering and, excessive police force, now we've come to gentrification, and these are all really big topics. I think we need to think about, and little old me and a little old 2-minute punk rock song, I barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, but it is interesting how it unfolds across the whole record, and I'll point out for anybody who hasn't followed the news, and of course I'm based here in Louisville. It was Sunday night. It came out that a gentrification project was possibly the thing that led to the death of Breonna Taylor, which has been sort of the eye-opening thing lately. The eye-opening thing today, it's to add along with all the rest.
And everything, yeah.
Yeah, you've said a little bit about this record with Blue Hearts, and we're not just talking about American Crisis, but American Crisis definitely paints it. That you are talking about the parallels a lot of times between, I think the years you said anyway was 1984 and 2020. I think what we're basically talking about here is the Reagan years and the Trump years. That's super interesting because on one side of the pop culture happenings, when we talk about what's happening out in the streets, people taking to the streets, of course, we're referencing the 60s a lot of times. What you're getting out of here is a bit more focused, I guess, on the political side of things. Again, as we talk about Reagan, let's start this. What was obvious to you about what was happening to both times as you were coming up in the 80s?
Well, I mean, I went to school with young Republicans. I remember them on campus with their briefcases, and they were all, very, very well to do, and they were talking about Ronald Reagan and we're going to change the world. And sure enough, Reagan won. And, onward we went. I remember coming to San Francisco in the summer of 81. It was, I was 20 years old. Husker was touring. Well, we called it touring. I mean, we were pretty much homeless and in a van. And if we could get a phone number for a place to stay, we'd go to that town and hang out and maybe get a show or 3 or 4, if we were lucky. And, I remember, being not a closeted young gay man, but sort of self-hating, not fully understanding my sexuality and my being and my work and, where all those things intersect. Much, completely at peace with it now, but at 20, not being real certain of what my future was. And I remember being here when, they made the discoveries with, Kaposi sarcoma and, PCP and gay men dying at an alarming rate in major cities, San Francisco and New York. And this thing called GRID that eventually got called AIDS. And, over the course of time, the Reagan administration just turned a blind eye to it. It was never mentioned. It was made fun of at, press conferences. I think it was, I've seen a lot of footage from back then as if I don't remember it, but to, refresh myself, I, watch people talking, and, it took our first, sort of, television movie star personality backed by evangelicals type president, what did it take him until 1985 to actually say the words, after he'd lost friends, people that were close to him. And, that parallel with where we are now, again, we're at the end of a first term of a television president who's got a lot of backing from the evangelicals. And it's sort of the sons of the fathers, I guess we could say, the Grahams and the Falwells. And it's the same, a lot of the same cast of characters. Maybe we don't have as many hysterical, made up crying women singing torch songs, and stuff like that. But it's that very repressive agenda. I guess now we call it a culture war. Back then I was just like, what the fuck are these people? Why are they doing this to me? What did I do? I'm just trying to live my life. Yeah, I mean, so you can see the parallels. And I guess as I started writing music for Blue Hearts, in the fall of last year, I was in Berlin playing a lot of guitar. I came back to San Francisco in late November, and then, America is just, we're constantly, it's a constant barrage of information, televisions, media, everything all the time. And, in Berlin, I was aware of what was happening, but when you're back in it and living in it, it resonates, a lot heavier. And a lot of the words for this record came out, and I was putting myself sort of back in the place that I was at the end of 1983, thinking about being in a band, being on tour, not really having a place to live, dependent on the kindness of others, making these records and just touring and going door to door and trying to tell these stories. And I remember the lead up to Zen Arcade having all this very angry music and being really confused about my sexuality and just writing all these words in the back of a van over, a weekend, and sharing it with the other guys and starting to make this concept record. And, anyways, you get the idea. It's just everything felt, when I looked back, I was like, my God, that's who I was, and it feels the same now. And what was my skill set then? What were the tools that I had to work with then? And I had a voice and a guitar and an amp and not much else. So I set out to not emulate, but just to recall that kind of feeling, to sort of put 1984 and 2020 next to each other and just say, wow, it's really starting to line up. And I guess the sad conclusion, in a sense, to this long-winded explanation is that, now we have a pandemic.
Right.
And we have Tony Fauci on television again. And I'm just like, you can't, not to diminish anything. This is just me personally going, you can't make this stuff up. You just cannot make this stuff up. And now, 6 months into absolute and complete chaos and total inefficiency and inaction by this government, I'm clearly not at a loss for words, but right. I'm just like a completely lost faith in this. I never had any faith in these people that are running the country now, and I have none at all now.
So as you look to November, do you have, we're talking obviously Trump versus Biden, but I think a lot of people are really curious about, that VP pick, because as Biden said, he might be the one-term president. So maybe who we're really voting for here is the vice president. Do you have the person that you would prefer to see in there?
I think this is you vote for America or you vote for Trump. Joe Biden clearly has all the experience in the world. He's been a world leader. He's been an emissary for this country for most of his life. I think he knows most of the leaders of the world. If anybody can try to go to the rest of the civilized world and ask forgiveness and try to rebuild things in a better way in terms of America and the rest of the world, I think Joe Biden is really good. I think the fact that he is committed to having a woman as vice president is a smart move. People are talking about women of color. Obviously have a lot of experience here with Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams. There's many great people. I was very excited about Pete Buttigieg, being a gay man, just seeing somebody at his age with military experience and just such a good thinker, such a good person. I think Bernie Sanders has got a lot of good qualities. Elizabeth Warren. There's a lot of good people on representing the Democrats now, and I think it's really up to Biden to sort of, maybe one thing that I'd like to see is for him, once he's made his vice presidential choice, is to then start letting us know who will be taking all of these key positions. Because one of the things that we learned, when you just say drain the swamp and destroy politics, you create a vacuum that can easily be filled by your billionaire friends that really don't know anything about politics and not much about life and really nothing about the real world. So For me, it would be nice if Biden would identify the key figures in the administration before we get to November, because then we can have a true compare and contrast.
No, I agree. I've said before that the smartest thing anybody on that debate stage, when we still had, a handful of them to say, was that if I win, this is my cabinet, because I thought it was a great line. And I'm glad you brought it, Pete, because, I'll tie that back around to what we were saying in those comparisons between the early 80s and 2020, because, for Pete to be a gay man and that only to be a blip of the conversation, I mean, that feels like one of the biggest differences. From your point of view, it's much less taboo, if it's taboo at all, to be gay anymore in popular culture, which I obviously I'm saying this as a straight man, seems like a humongous accomplishment. Like, at least some version of the dream must have been realized. What are the hurdles then? What are the hurdles in the gay community at this point, as we just come out of Pride Month, which is still a very, very important conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, it really, I mean, right now the key issue is the trans community, and trans people of color. I mean, historically, trans people of color were, there for the LGBTQ community at the very beginning, the Comptons or Stonewall or any of the major turning points in American gay culture. My experience as a gay man, being marginalized, being told I'm less than, that's my personal story. I cannot apply that story to others, but as we all move forward with our grievances, which are the grievances of the American people and not of the leader of the American people, we will find intersections and we will find commonality, and that's where we, hopefully as a democracy, as America, we identify those intersections and we move forward with those in mind. I think that's the goal right now. Specifically for the gay community, I mean, the Supreme Court ruling, giving equal rights was great. I mean, that's a big move. I've had these conversations with people before. I remember having a long sort of a by mail correspondence with Margaret Cho, and it was right around the time that a lot of gay progress had been made, and she was very celebratory. And I just said, Margaret, not to be a downer, but this whole thing is always a pendulum. It goes back and forth. And no change is perfect. No change is permanent. No victory is guaranteed forever. And, forces will come and try to undo all the progress that's been made, whether it was during the second Obama administration or before that. I used to do a lot of work with Servicemen's Legal Defense Network, around ENDA, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, stuff like that. I did a lot of work with Evan Wolfson with Freedom to Marry. So I mean, I've been fairly engaged, but right now I think it's gay youth at risk. I think it's trans people of color. I mean, my God, what was there? Has there been like 6 or 7, trans murders in the last month? During Pride month, that's where the focus needs to go. I mean, I'm an old white gay guy. I'm represented. Modern Family will be in syndication forever. I don't know. Is it too soon to have any kind of humor? I feel so bad even making jokes about anything. But yeah, I think. For me, I felt like a lot of progress has been made. I worry about kids. I worry about people of color. I really worry about the trans community. And that's where we need to put our energy as we move forward.
Yeah. I'm at least very hopeful that, because for all of my disdain for the social media world, it seems like it is pushing the conversations a lot faster than they used to go. And I do see that out there. The fact that this is in the conversation, and it is a big part of the conversation right now, in what seems like, I'm learning new terms every day. My lexicon is expanding every single day at a rate that I've never at least been aware of, at least. And I think that's, even at the tiniest, magnification, a very promising thing, at least coming from us.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. Again, being older than the people who are about to affect the change that we need. Again, it's always a battle to keep up with terminology and to keep up with how people self-identify. And at my age, I'm always afraid I'm going to slip up and say the wrong thing. So forgive me if I do, but I'm trying to learn and listen, as you are. And again, with the LGBTQ community, with Black Lives Matter. I mean, there's, the language and the discourse, it's, again, because of social media, it's instant. What was an acceptable term last week is now we don't say that anymore. And it's like, whoa, okay. I'm trying to keep up. I think I'm a good person. I'm trying to do the right thing.
I think that's the important thing right there. Yeah, it's knowing I don't know who said this, and probably plenty of people have said this. It's knowing that you're occasionally going to say the wrong thing and being very okay and upfront with rolling with the change immediately. And I think,
yeah.
we cannot be afraid of that. We have to be ready for that, that's going to happen. This all, I guess, expands more on the record, Blue Hearts. I mean, this seems to be the running theme of the rest of the record. Is that what we can expect?
Yeah. Generally speaking, the record starts pretty hot with politics. I mean, I come right out of the gate. It's a start with a sort of downbeat acoustic song that lays out some of the issues, and then the next couple songs are very fiery. There's a song called Forecast of Rain that's going to be an important track. It really gets deep into me and religion, and I'll sort of preempt the conversation that I know will come when people hear the song a little bit. I went to church every Sunday. I went to Catholic school once a week. I was confirmed, and that's where I left Catholicism for the time. In my 40s, in the aughts, when I was living in Washington, D.C., I went back to the Catholic Church for 3 years and tried to find the message. I tried to find a place, and unfortunately, I could not find a place for myself. I can't say I'm an expert on religion. I can't quote scripture, but then again, lots of people can't. I understand religion has a place, and it has an important place for a lot of people. It's about community, and it's just about gathering and trying to build a better world and trying to live sort of in the norms of society. Not all of those norms work for me. Many of them do, and I carry that with me every day. I think we all do as sort of upright citizens. It's I do have problems when, again, the Grahams and the Falwells and the evangelicals, by and large, have no problem throwing unconditional support behind Trump, who is a racist and a liar. And I could keep checking the list off, but that is not the way I learned religion. And that does not look like the religion that I have an appreciation for. So having said that, yeah, that song is the Forecast of Rain is going to be a real fiery song. There's another song called Password to My Soul, which is sort of the wrap up of the record, and then there's an epilogue song that follows that. But again, most of the record is very political. There's a lot of sort of strong takes on social media, and privacy and being tracked. I try to do it in tongue-in-cheek ways. There's a few bad relationship songs, but I think all in all, it's pretty much a protest record in, I guess in the sense that I learned what protest records were in the 60s. So as a kid,
An album for our times. As a former altar boy, I can appreciate where you're coming from on all of that as well. When I left at 13, as I get out of here, I made mention to if I don't knock everything down from my tape wall, just behind me right there.
Oh my goodness!
I just noticed that was behind me anyway.
I'm gonna see if I can beat you with that. I have a mini disc of
Let's see. I was thinking, yeah, nice looking, nice blue blue writing there. It was a good tape.
Even, yeah, I love how Ryko carried that sort of the Coke bottle blue text that they did. It was nice.
That's fun. Bob Mould, thank you so much for joining me again on this edition of Kyle Meredith Live. I want to point out again, Blue Hearts comes out September 25th. I got that date right?
Yep.
That'll be out here. I'm looking so forward to this record. You know I love what you do, so thank you for continuing to do that and being a voice in these times as well.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for giving me the platform. And, for anybody else in my position, if you have a voice, this would be a good time to use it.
Absolutely. All right, remember the series runs every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on the Consequence of Sound Instagram. You can also find me 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday at WFPK.org. Thank you all so much for watching and joining us. And Bob, thank you so much again.
Thanks.